Hey, this is Hungry, and I'm here to help you get better at Survivor in Dead by Daylight. Please excuse the computer noise in the background. I don't really have much of a professional setup, but hopefully it's not too annoying. Before this video actually starts, I'd like to give out a few disclaimers. This video will not magically make you better at the game. It will help you if you're a somewhat new player, and you may even see some immediate improvements in your gameplay. However, you will not magically start running every killer in every match 5 generators straight. That'll take some time. It is very possible that in this video I will give inaccurate or seemingly unhelpful advice. Nobody is perfect, and it is possible that I may give what some would consider bad advice. The advice I give in this video has dramatically helped me become a better player, and my only intentions are to help you get better as well. If you disagree with anything in this video, I would love for you to let me know in the comments so that we could possibly have a back and forth, or so that I could just learn from the mistakes I made in the video. If you're a perfectionist, Dead by Daylight will be a very difficult game to become better at. You need to approach this frustrating game with a clear and optimistic mindset. If you continuously blame all of your failures on something you think is outside of your control, you won't get anywhere. If you constantly blame yourself, then you also need to be careful, as this game can be very unrelentless. If you're just a casual player who likes to have fun and not take the game too seriously, then this video is not for you. This video is for people really seeking to become the best that they could be at the game. This video is also centered towards solo queue players, as I have only played solo queue Survivor for the entirety of my Dead by Daylight experience. Patience is everything. To become better at Survivor, you must equalize, taking the burden of failure off of your back while also reflecting on your mistakes. This is extremely important because otherwise you'll find yourself getting too frustrated. Take breaks from the game if you're finding it hard to play without dreading every match. Lastly, I will not be talking about every possible perk and every killer scenario. The first thing to understand is that wasting the killer's time as Survivor is the #1 most important thing you can possibly do. Your goal when running the killer is to give your Survivor friends more time to work on generators or do other useful things like cleansing hex totems. So how do you effectively run a killer? I personally think that understanding lunge distance is one of the best things you could learn as Survivor. It applies to windows, pallets, and even dead zones. It applies everywhere in every run against any killer. A dead zone is a location on the map without pallets or windows, or a location on the map that used to have pallets and now does not because they've all been broken, for those who didn't know. I'll have a fully dedicated section to understanding lunge distance after we talk about pallets and windows first. It may be extremely obvious, but pallets and windows are your best friends. The most important thing to remember is that you need to move from one pallet or window to the next. If you fail to do this, you'll end up dying in most cases, unless you learn to juke, which we will talk about later. It may not be readily apparent how to properly use pallets and windows to their greatest effect. In this video, I'll help you understand how to play pallets and windows as effectively as possible from my own experience with the game. The tips I give in every section will become more and more advanced as we go on. Tip number 1. Understand that learning the maps is part of the game. If you find yourself dying constantly because you're unaware of dead zones, dead ends, and whatnot, just safely conclude that it wasn't your fault and that you'll learn from the mistake the next time you play that specific map. Tip number 2. You may have heard of the term greeting when it comes to pallets. If you're unaware of the term, greeting pallets means that you want to milk as much value and time from the pallet as possible. Greeting pallets is only sometimes the best thing to do. It is extremely dependent on the killer, their skill level, and what pallet you're running. I recently watched a DBD tips video where the creator of the video claimed that you must greed every pallet as much as possible. This is simply not true. It is very possible to over-greed a pallet and end up taking an unnecessary hit or down because of it. It is much better to avoid over-greeding rather than become a victim of it. Also, sometimes you might just feel uncomfortable at a specific pallet based on the killer. There are hay bales way too high to see over against a hag. Well shit, we just better drop it fairly early and move on to the next pallet or window. How exactly can you greed a pallet though? Well, there are 2 very clear ways that you can greed a pallet. In scenario 1, you fake the pallet drop. Faking pallet drops is an incredibly effective way to waste more time on that pallet. Here's an example of that. Now in this clip right here, I could have waited a little bit longer, but I basically go ahead and do this little weird turn at the pallet, making him think that I'm going to drop it. I immediately turn around. Unfortunately, I get caught on this little slip, which causes me to lose way too much time. So I had to pull the pallet a little bit early there, but that's the gist of a little bit of a fake pallet drop. Alright, so in this clip, I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to pull that same trick. I come to the pallet, I maybe loop it once, I go around, do a little bit of this, and he's going to think I'm going to pull it. And that's just an easy way to save another loop around the pallet, etc. Now I realize this is getting old now, but I'll show you one more example of this. So I go ahead and run this pyramid head here. I'm watching for his red stain. I see it on that side, I come around. He's going to try to use his power here, I dodge. I walk right back in, acting like I'm going to pull it, and I get another loop around the pallet. Never fake a pallet drop on the same pallet twice though. The killer will understand the first time that they lost precious time and will likely swing through the pallet the next time. As you can see here, I trick him once, I run around, I go ahead and run around one more time. And then here I make the mistake of thinking he's going to fall for it again, and I take an unnecessary hit. This is exactly what I was talking about before, where you never want to overgreed. If you overgreed, you're just going to get injured, it's going to cost your team a lot of time, and you just completely lost that scenario with the killer. Now the second scenario to playing with pallets involves tightly looping. Let's just first define what a tile is though. A tile, from my own created definition, is just a place on the map that includes pallets and windows to play around. Tightly looping a tile is incredibly important in keeping as much distance from you and the killer as possible. On any pallet, if you tightly loop it well enough, it could be very hard for the killer to catch up to you, and it could give you more distance and time in the long run. Now I realize I've already shown this clip before, but this is a great example of tightly looping a tile. So you see how I'm staying very, very close to the edge? That's exactly what you want to do when you loop any pallet in the game. Alright, let's finish off this section with talking about windows. We'll get to the fun stuff soon, I promise. So, windows can be slow vaulted, medium vaulted, and fast vaulted. In Chase, every single one of these can pretty much be useful. Medium vaults, it's all very, very specific. And it all depends on the killer lunge distance. So, you know, in some cases it might be a very good idea to medium vault. In some cases it'll be a very good idea to slow vault against killers like Spirit, perhaps, where you don't want to be heard vaulting. You know, etc, etc. But in most scenarios, when you're in Chase, you do want to fast vault. It is the most commonly used, as it's the most beneficial in Chase most times. Lastly, regarding windows, you never want to always vault a window when you see it. Let me show you what I mean in this next clip. Alright, so the killer's behind me up the stairs. It's a nemesis. I'm just going to run through this pallet to the next tile. And I go ahead and I try to fast vault this, but I'm unsuccessful. It doesn't really matter because he doubles back. And here's the key point. You do not want to vault that window, because if you vault that window, he could double back and kill you. Instead, I just run forward and make it to this next pallet. The last clip was okay for showing, you know, how to work around with windows, when to vault, when not to, but this is a much better example. So as you can see, I run up to this window and I don't vault it, and you'll see him back up. And that's just another way to fake a window and gain yourself some time. I'm going to be honest with you guys, that's pretty much all that there is when it comes to looping. Just understand that when you're done with one pallet, you move to the next tile, you move to the next available pallet that you could find. If you so happen to never find a pallet, that's extremely unlucky. The next section is all about juking, so it'll hopefully help you in situations where you're basically destined to go down. But yeah, just play those pallets as efficiently as you can by tightly looping, faking them. If the killer doesn't fall for the fake, stop doing it. If they show signs that they're going to respect the pallet, then you can try to go for it. And using those little window fakes is very valuable sometimes to trick a killer into giving you another 20 seconds to chase, whatever it takes, right, to get those generators done. So yeah, that's pretty much all there is when it comes to pallets and windows. Like I said, the next section will be heavily about juking. So I'll show you some very simple jukes that get way too many killers, and you can hopefully go try them in your game. Alright, so in this clip I do something pretty dumb. In this situation you want to run to the left here and not vault the window, but I'm brain dead, so I fall for his trick. I go backwards to dodge him, and I'm going to go ahead and get the pallet after this. Now, I'm not going to lie, I forgot an extremely important point in the looping section of the video, but I'll include it in the juking section because why not? You always want to loop the long side of the pallet. Never loop the short side, because this pallet right here is extremely unsafe. Like, if you try to loop this, you're very likely to go down. One thing you want to know about juking is that you never want to rely on juking to save yourself. If you can, loop properly so that you never have to resort to juking, because it's just so risky, and although it's incredibly fun, it's a very sure way to go down. Now, you'll notice here that since this pallet is so incredibly unsafe, I'm unsure as to which direction he's going to go, so I hesitate greatly there. That is a big mistake, because the moment that I do that, I can no longer get to this pallet and pull it before he is within lunge distance and can kill me. So therefore, you're going to see right now that I quickly turn to my right to get into his FOV. Now that we have the killer in a situation where he's ready to lunge at me, but he knows that I'm going to his left, I'm going to pull back to my left, if that makes sense, and you're going to see that it just fucks him up so bad. Now that we've completely bamboozled this guy, you're going to just want to keep running and go to the next pallet, okay? Don't do what I do here. This is a terrible example, because look how far away he is, and look where I'm at. I'm ready to go. And this guy's over here swinging at fucking the ghost of, I don't know, something past, right? So you're going to see here that I actually run back into his FOV. This confuses the shit out of him. And then I do this little move, and he's once again bamboozled. Alright, I'm going to be honest, this distancing was terrible. This little move that I do it all the time, but this distancing is not what you want. I'm going to show you what better distancing looks like here in a second. What? I'm going to hit him with the 1-2 dodge though. 1, 2. Got him. Watch this, you want to see a trick? Whoop! Gets him every time. Alright, if you thought those other clips were silly, I mean, this is just the furthest and just silliest that it gets when it comes to juking. I'm obviously applying like what I know about juking in these scenarios. That's why I'm not getting hit. But like I said before, only rely on it in very specific situations when you need to get to a pallet or a window, etc. You gonna let me mend? Ooh, that's a glyph. I kinda want it. Give me it. Come here. You fucker. I want my glyph. Yeah, exactly. Give me that shit. Oh! Damn. Oh shit, he's awake. He's sentient. Oh! Oh! Oh my god. Dude. What the fuck? Alright, now I understand that this killer is not the best. Same thing with some of the others, but this is a very important kind of showcase here. So you see this is a good example of cooldowns and understanding them. So I know that her attack has a certain cooldown, and I'm going to run in right when it's about to finish. And if she basically chooses to slam that mouse button down, she'll probably throw another out. And this wasn't the best example. The timing's a little off, but the idea was still there. Now, this video was pretty much only about looping. There are so many things that go into playing Survivor that do not include looping. You know, like when to save your teammates, how to evade the killer, because evading the killer could be equally as important as looping them. Yeah, when to be on generators, when to be looking for hexes, knowing what's going on around you, perks, you know, yada yada yada. Just the list goes on. But hopefully this video showcased to you a few things that you can introduce to your Dead by Daylight Survivor arsenal. Things like very simple FOV techs where you are very quickly tricking killers into thinking you're going into one direction when you're not. A lot of those jukey things won't really work with better killers. They might, it all depends, but if you just stick to those looping tips I gave where you're just moving from one pallet to the next, you're trying to milk out as much time and value from each pallet, you are fast vaulting as many windows as you can, and not vaulting windows that you should not vault, for the record. If you just use all those kind of things that I explained, and you develop these skills over time, you will become a much better survivor. You will not jump into like matches after this video and be like, holy shit, this stuff like really is working for me. It's amazing. I love it. A lot of the times when I'm juking killers and when I'm doing those plays on the pallets and all that, it's because I have the experience of understanding why the killer is very likely to fall for it. You could tell very early on in a match if a killer is good or bad, and if they're going to fall for these tricks and if they're not. Now, if you want a good decider to know if a killer is decent or not, you could try some of these jukey tech things and then kind of tell from there and be like, oh, this killer's anxious. He just always goes for lunges, and I could probably, you know, pull some of these tricks off very easily. You know, it all comes with experience. So I hope this video taught you a thing or two, but the bottom line is that these things are going to take time to develop. When I play Survivor, I'm playing with a team, I'm playing with other people that I'm talking to, which is very rarely because I don't really play solo queue. Very often they'll hear me say, I'm running the killer, and then a minute later, I'm still running the killer, and then minutes later, I'm still running the killer, he's still on me. Like, it'll go on forever if you just move from pallet to window to pallet to window to window to pallet to pallet. Just keep moving through the tiles. Try to evade your teammates if possible, because that's always useful. But that's really it. I mean, in terms of the grand scheme of looping, it's nothing crazy. Now, when you get to specific killers, things start to get a little complicated. Like with Huntress, you kind of want to run through the pallet so she throws her hatchet late. It's all based on cooldowns and all that shit. So knowing your cooldowns is incredibly useful. Like, if you want to learn one big thing from this video, please learn your cooldowns. And something I have not included yet in this entire video is a very simple and incredibly useful tip. If you want to become a better survivor, play a lot of killer. Okay? Go play a lot of killer. You're gonna get your ass kicked, but you're gonna learn a lot from the survivors you play against. You're gonna see what they're doing. You're gonna realize that, oh shit, for some reason I misplayed that, and it's because the survivor did something very smart. And you can look into that and be like, oh shit, when I play Survivor, I need to try that. And then therefore you will become way better. You need to be a good killer to be a good survivor. It's just a fact. You just need to. And that'll come with many hours of playing the game and understanding things. Other than that, I'm pretty sure the last thing I would showcase is flashbang and flashlight saves. They're fairly simple to do. I've since moved from flashlights to flashbangs. I love flashbang saves. I do that shit all the time. And when you get Leon Kennedy and you get that flashbang perk, I heavily recommend that you just count out the timing for your flashbang. Just count it out. Throw it on the floor, start counting, and you should get an average number every now and then. I don't know what that number is because I never counted. I just kind of have a mental clock of when it's going to go off. And flashbangs are extremely useful when saving your opponents and yada yada. That's pretty much it. Other than that, utilize walking quite a bit when in areas that the killer's around, because you can very, very, very easily stay hidden. Like I said, this is a video about looping, not about all this other shit. I'm just going off on a tangent just in case anyone wants to listen to it. And yeah, I'll include a flashbang save here in a second, so you can kind of see what that looks like. But other than that, that's pretty much the video. Don't overcomplicate looping. Just don't overgreed. Keep it simple. Follow the tips I gave you in this video. And like I said, I really hope that this video was useful to you, because I don't even know. I don't even know if people will like this video, but who knows. I'm just putting it out there because why the hell not? So yeah, go have fun, and I hope you get a lot better at the game. Alright, I'm a complete idiot, and this topic gets a lot more complicated than what I'm going to make it out to be. But this right here, what you're seeing, is proper, like, lunge distance. Whenever you heard, like, me talk about lunge distance earlier in the video, this distance right here is basically what I'm talking about. If she lunges at me from there and I'm running, there's no way in hell she's going to hit me. So that's kind of what I meant by, like, getting to the line of lunge distance. Because if I just, like, if I run into her, but I run out of her lunge distance, her lunge radius, they're likely to swing. So that's kind of an explanation of what lunge distance means in my own definition. It's just basically, it's like the circle around the killer where they can lunge, do a full lunge and hit you. If you're outside of that, and maybe even so outside of it that you can run towards it and still not be in it, then it's very easy to juke killers that way. And that's kind of what I showed in some of the examples before, but it wasn't perfect. Like, there wasn't a single really perfect one except for, like, the Albert Wesker one. So, anyways, video's fucking done now. Sorry for, like, this terribly made video, but whatever.